Well, we can speak now to Steve Fish, Professor of Political Science at the University of California, Berkeley. He's also the author of Democracy Derailed in Russia, The Failure of Open Politics. Thank you for coming on the programme.
My pleasure.
So can you try and put this latest drone attacks and the continued fighting, whilst efforts to try and get some kind of ceasefire are supposedly underway at the same time, can you try and square that circle for us?
There's no squaring the circle, Lewis. These drone attacks actually indicate what's really going on, which of course is that the war is going on at full speed. Putin is not interested in ending the war. He thinks he can last out the Ukrainians and the West. He thinks he's winning. In fact, he might be getting overly rosy news from his advisors. You know, something like 300 or 400 Russian troops a day are dying right now in Ukraine. Of course, Putin is willing to pay this price, even for the tiniest gains on the ground. He doesn't really care about the human price of this war. What's more, his goal is again to conquer Ukraine. He's always made that completely clear. He shows no interest in ending the war, and what we see lately going on the ground is an indicator of that.
So when you come to any kind of discussions between the two sides, you will have Ukraine not wanting to give up any of its territory. You'll have Vladimir Putin only wanting to keep territory. How do you get to any kind of resolution? You
don't. That's the problem. And underlying all of this is something that makes a resolution even more difficult, which is that, you know, Russia has been saying all along, Putin says, recently his foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, said that Russia will negotiate from a position of concern with the root causes of the war, resolving the war's root causes. Well, what are the war's root causes to Putin? It's Ukraine's statehood. Putin has always made it clear that he regards conquest of Ukraine as his main priority. Putin does not think that Russia can be a great country, a secure country, if it's not an empire. And above all, Ukraine is necessary for Russia to be an empire. It has to be part of Russia in Putin's mind. Until Ukraine is conquered, all of it, this war is going to continue.
So does that mean Ukraine's allies effectively have one option and one option only, which is to significantly increase military support and make significant military gains?
Well, provided they're committed to Ukraine's life and security and Europe's life and security. Now, the problem, of course, is that we recently had a change of administration in the United States. You probably noticed that, with the Trump administration coming in and completely changing the entire direction of American foreign policy. No longer in Trump's mind, no longer should the United States side with its allies and protect its allies against its enemies. Trump wants to switch sides. He sides with Putin. Now, recently, it seems like rather than aggressively siding with Putin, Trump might want to just wash his hands of the war and leave it to the Ukrainians. We can always count on Trump, though, never applying meaningful pressure to Putin. That's just the way Trump is. He's essentially on Putin's side. The question now, of course, is will the Europeans fill that gap that the loss of American support has led to? And so far, we do see real leadership on the part of the Europeans. Much more is needed, but especially the new Chancellor of Germany, of course, the Prime Minister of Britain, the President of France, the Prime Minister of Poland, recently has shown a great deal of resolve in trying to fill that gap that the United States' kind of cooling of support for Ukraine has created. If the Europeans can do that, they can sustain pressure on Russia that will keep Ukraine in the war, keep Ukraine alive, at least for now. The Europeans finally seem to have seen that their own security depends on the Ukrainians' ability to stave off Russian attacks.
But there has been considerable military support so far, and filling a gap from the US still only brings you back up to where you started effectively. And by your argument, there needs to be significant increases in military support to try and regain territory.
Absolutely. Significant increases in military support, also in financial support, also new sanctions on Russia. And the German government recently has shown that it understands this. You know, the EU is a very big economy. And even if the United States eases off sanctions on Russia, the Europeans can actually, in some ways, increase Russia's pain. There's also a sign in the United States that, remember, in the United States, most Americans side with Ukraine very unequivocally. Trump is kind of an outlier. And the Senate just passed a resolution a few days ago. Even a majority of Republicans joined the resolution to impose new tariffs on countries that buy Russia's oil and gas and uranium and so on. That, of course, predominantly includes China. So Congress seems to be in some ways kind of trying to push the Trump administration along toward more forcefully siding with the Ukrainians. There could be a kind of good cop, bad cop dynamic going on here, with the Senate being the bad cop. At any rate, the United States Congress, for the most part, is on Ukraine's side. It's the Trump administration that's much more equivocal.
Professor Steve Fish, thank you for coming on the program. Thank you.
Pleasure, Lewis.